And here we go from the national headquarters of RT America in our nation's capital. Hello again, everybody. I'm Rick Sanchez. So our country, the United States of America, is so vacuous politically when it comes to matters pertaining to global climate change that while most of the nations are already making the necessary changes to try and compete in places like the Arctic, where ice caps are shrinking, whether we like it or not, we haven't even named a person to look into this. That's right. The post of Special U.S. Representative for the Arctic has remained vacant since Mr. Trump took office. Meanwhile, Canada, Norway, Denmark, China, Russia, all of them are wasting no time at all in looking for opportunities for resource exploration, as in oil, and possibly even more importantly, the new shipping lanes that could be formed as a result of the breaking up of some of that ice in places like, you know, the Arctic and Antarctica as well. So what experts are saying is that politics and the big oil money that funds, most notably Republican campaigns here in the United States, not only affects our policies, but it also affects our understanding of global climate change as a whole. You want the best example? That guy right there. See that guy? Nowhere is this more evident than in Florida, where that man, the guy who's now a senator who used to be the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, actually issued a gag order in the state of Florida. No one was allowed to use the words global warming because he figured if he couldn't say it, then nobody would know it's actually happening, right? The entire phrase was literally struck from all government documents. Think about that. Meanwhile, see that? That's Miami Beach, where once a month, the high tides from the Atlantic Ocean sweep onto the beach, and people's homes and streets are suddenly covered with salt water. But nobody's allowed to talk about that because you can't use the word global warming, so you have to pretend it rained even when it didn't. Even when it didn't. These are images I guess the Republican governor there would prefer that nobody talks about because you're not allowed to use the word global warming. So who knows? It just happens, right? So by not talking about it and kowtowing to energy moguls who fund American campaigns, are our elected leaders paving the way for countries like Russia and China to essentially eat our lunch when it comes to what may be a new frontier? We've got a special report here on the News with Rick Sanchez where we do believe it's time to do news again. Okay, when it comes to our planet's climate change, there is no one more appreciative of the fact that U.S. politicians tend to be old, stodgy, and ignorant than the Russians. Yep, Russia's perfectly positioned to take advantage of the new shipping lanes that could allow goods to be transported throughout the top, like right through the top of the world, rather than through like places like the Panama Canal. But even more importantly, Russia can and will claim Arctic territory that literally butts up right against its northern border. And don't be surprised if some of that territory happens to contain oil or shale or natural gas deposits. In fact, while the U.S. sleeps and even denies that global warming exists, one Russian claim is already being considered right now by the United Nations and most likely approved. You want more on that? Here's RT's Yulia Shapovalova.
A UN subcommission has recognized Russia's claim that its continental shelf extends into the Arctic territory. Russia's Federal Agency for Subsoil Use expects a final decision on the Russian application in the next 2 or 3 sessions. So Russia will have to uphold its bid at the UN Commission.
The UN subcommission has declared the geological affiliation of the territories, which we include in the extended borders of the continental shelf, to the structures of the continuation of the shelf and the continent of the Russian Federation.
In August 2015, Russia sent a request to the UN Commission to expand its boundaries of the continental shelf in the Arctic by 1.2 million square kilometers. That's over 463,000 miles. The shelf stretches over 350 nautical miles, or 650 kilometers from the shore. By the lowest estimates, that will allow the potential hydrocarbon reserves to be increased by an estimated 5 billion tons of fuel. In 2002, a similar application was rejected due to a lack of evidence. According to international law, the North Pole and the adjacent region of the Arctic Ocean do not belong to any country. Meanwhile, Norway, the USA, Canada and Denmark also claim different parts of the Arctic Ocean. The interest of the countries in the northern seas is dictated by the fact that their subsoil contains 83 billion tons of inferred fuel, of which about 80% falls in the Barents and Kara seas. At the same time, the likelihood of discovering new large oil and gas fields on practically unexplored areas of the shelf is very high. Currently, only Denmark has submitted an application for expanding the borders of its continental shelf in the Arctic, in addition to Russia. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, a continental shelf extension requires evidence that the adjacent geological makeup of the ocean bottom is of a continental nature. For the news with Rick Sanchez, Yulia, Shapovalova, RT.
I'm Rick Sanchez. You found us on YouTube, and that's awesome. But you know what? I'm also live every night at 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern on DirecTV and Dish and cable and satellite, the RT app, and Pluto TV. I'll see you there.